Chapter 14 The Man of Myung. The crowd was caused not by the expectation of a man to be hanged, but by the contemplation of a man who was hanged. The carriage, which had been stopped for a minute, resumed its way, passed through the crowd, threaded the Rue Saint Honore, turned into the Rue de Bon Enfant, and stopped before a low door. The door opened. Two guards received Bonacieux in their arms from the officer who supported him. They carried him through an alley, up a flight of stairs, and deposited him in an antechamber. All these movements had been effected mechanically, as far as he was concerned. He had walked as one walks in a dream. He had a glimpse of objects as through a fog. His ears had perceived sounds without comprehending them. He might have been executed at the moment without his making a single gesture in his own defense or uttering a cry to implore mercy. He remained on the bench, with his back leaning against the wall, and his hands hanging down, exactly on the spot where the guards placed him. On looking around him, however, as he could perceive no threatening object, as nothing indicated that he ran any real danger, as the bench was comfortably covered with a well-stuffed cushion, as the wall was ornamented with a beautiful Cordova leather, and as large red damask curtains, fastened back by gold clasps, floated before the window, he perceived by degrees that his fear was exaggerated, and he began to turn his head to the right and to the left, upward and downward. At this movement, which nobody opposed, he resumed a little carriage, and ventured to draw up one leg and then the other. At length, with the help of his two hands, he lifted himself from the bench, and found himself on his feet. At this moment an officer with a pleasant face opened a door, continued to exchange some words with a person in the next chamber, and then came up to the prisoner. "Is your name Bonacieux?" said he. "Yes, monsieur officer," stammered the mercer, more dead than alive. "At your service." "Come in," said the officer, and he moved out of the way to let the mercer pass. The latter obeyed without reply, and entered the chamber, where he appeared to be expected. It was a large cabinet, close and stifling, with the walls furnished with arms offensive and defensive, and in which there was already a fire, although it was scarcely the end of the month of September. A square table, covered with books and papers, upon which was unrolled an immense plan of the city of La Rochelle, occupied the center of the room. Standing before the chimney was a man of middle height, of a haughty, proud mien, with piercing eyes, a large brow, and a thin face, which was made still longer by a royale, or imperial it is now called, surmounted by a pair of mustaches. Although this man was scarcely 36 or 37 years of age, hair, mustaches, and royale all began to gray. This man, except the sword, had all the appearance of a soldier, and his buff boots, still slightly covered with dust, indicated that he had been on horseback in the course of the day. This man was Armand Jean Duplessis, Cardinal de Richelieu. Not such as he is now represented, broken down like an old man, suffering like a martyr, his body bent, his voice failing, buried in a large armchair, as in an anticipated tomb, no longer living, but by strength of his genius, and no longer maintaining the struggle with Europe, but by the eternal application of his thoughts. But such as he really was at this period, that is to say, an active and gallant cavalier, already weak of body, but sustained by that moral power which made of him one of the most extraordinary men that ever lived, preparing, after having supported the Duc de Nevers in his duchy of Mantua, after having taken Nimes, Castries, and Uzes to drive the English from the Isle of Ré, and lay siege to La Rochelle. At first sight, nothing denoted the cardinal, and it was impossible for those who did not know his face to guess in whose presence they were. The poor mercer remained standing at the door, while the eyes of the personage we have just described were fixed upon him, and appeared to wish to penetrate even into the depths of the past. "Is this Bonacieux?" asked he, after a moment of silence. "Yes, monsieur," replied the officer. "Oh, monseigneur," replied the officer. "That's well. Give me those papers, and leave us." The officer took from the table the papers pointed out, gave them to him who asked for them, bowed to the ground, and retired. Bonacieux recognized in these papers his interrogatories of the Bastille. From time to time the man up by the chimney raised his eyes from the writings, and plunged them like poignards into the heart of the poor mercer. At the end of 10 minutes of reading and 10 seconds of examination, the cardinal was satisfied. "That head has never conspired," murmured he. "But it matters not. We will see." "You are accused of high treason," said the cardinal slowly. "So I have been told already, Monseigneur," cried Bonacieux, giving his interrogator the title he had heard the officer give him. "But I swear to you that I know nothing about it." The cardinal repressed a smile. "You have conspired with your wife, with Madame de Chevreuse, and with my Lord Duke of Buckingham." "Indeed, Monseigneur," responded the mercer. "I have heard her pronounce all those names." "And on what occasion?" "She said that the Cardinal de Richelieu had drawn the Duke of Buckingham to Paris to ruin him and to ruin the Queen." "She said that?" cried the cardinal with violence. "Yes, Monseigneur, but I told her she was wrong to talk about such things, and that his Eminence was incapable—" "Hold your tongue! You are stupid!" replied the cardinal. "That's exactly what my wife said, Monseigneur." "Do you know who carried off your wife?" "No, Monseigneur." "You have suspicions, nevertheless?" "Yes, Monseigneur, but these suspicions appeared to be disagreeable to Monsieur the Commissary, and I no longer have them." "Your wife has escaped. Did you know that?" "No, Monseigneur. I learned it since I have been in prison, and that from the conversation of Monsieur the Commissary, an amiable man." The cardinal repressed another smile. "Then you are ignorant of what has become of your wife since her flight?" "Absolutely, Monseigneur, but she has most likely returned to the Louvre." "At 1 o'clock this morning she had not returned." "My God! What can have become of her, then?" "We shall know, be assured. Nothing is concealed from the cardinal. The cardinal knows everything." "In that case, Monseigneur, do you believe the cardinal will be so kind as to tell me what has become of my wife?"
"Perhaps he may, but you must, in the first place, reveal to the cardinal all you know of your wife's relations with Madame de Chevreuse."
"But, Monseigneur, I know nothing about them. I have never seen her."
"When you went to fetch your wife from the Louvre, did you always return directly home?"
"Scarcely ever. She had business to transact with linen drapers to whose houses I conducted her."
"And how many were there of these linen drapers?"
"Two, Monseigneur.
"And where did they live?"
One in Rue de Vaugirard, the other in Rue de la Harpe."
"Did you go into these houses with her?"
"Never, Monseigneur. I waited at the door."
"And what excuse did she give you for entering all alone?"
"She gave me none. She told me to wait, and I waited."
"You are a very complaisant husband, my dear Monsieur Bonacieux," said the cardinal.
"Calls me his dear Monsieur," said the mercer to himself. "Peste! Matters are all going right."
"Should you know those doors again?"
"Yes."
"Do you know the numbers?"
"Yes."
"What are they?"
"Number 25 in the Rue de Vaugirard, 75 in Rue de la Harpe."
"That's well," said the cardinal.
At these words he took up a silver bell and rang it. The officer entered. "Go," said he in a subdued voice, "and find Rochefort. Tell him to come to me immediately, if he has returned." "The count is here," said the officer, "and requests to speak with your Eminence instantly." "Let him come in, then," said the cardinal quickly. The officer sprang out of the apartment with the alacrity which all the servants of the cardinal displayed in obeying him. "To your Eminence," murmured Bonacieux, rolling his eyes around in astonishment. 5 seconds had scarcely elapsed after the disappearance of the officer when the door opened, and a new personage entered. "It is he!" cried Bonacieux.
"He? What he?"
asked the cardinal.
"The man who abducted my wife."
The cardinal rang a second time. The officer reappeared. "Place this man in the care of his guards again, and let him wait till I send for him." "No, Monseigneur, no, it is not he!" cried Bonacieux. "No, I was deceived. This is quite another man, and does not resemble him at all. Monsieur is, I am sure, an honest man." "Take away that fool," said the cardinal. The officer took Bonacieux by the arm and led him into the antechamber where he found his two guards. The newly introduced personage followed Bonacieux impatiently with his eyes till he had gone out, and the moment the door closed, "They have seen each other," said he, approaching the cardinal eagerly. "Who?" asked his Eminence. "He and she."
"The queen and the duke?" cried Richelieu. Yes. Where? At the Louvre. Sure of it? Perfectly sure. Who told you? Madame de Lannoy, who is devoted to your eminence, as you know. Why did you not let me know sooner? Whether by chance or mistrust, the queen made Madame de Surgis sleep in her chamber and detained her all day. Well, we are beaten. Now let us try to take our revenge. I will assist you with all my heart, Monseigneur. Be assured of that. How did it come about? At 12:30, the queen was with her women. Where? In her bedchamber. Go on. When somebody had come and brought her a handkerchief, the laundress. And then? The queen immediately exhibited strong emotion, and, despite the rouge with which her face was covered, evidently turned pale. And then? And then? She then arose, and with altered voices, Ladies, said she, wait for me 10 minutes. I shall soon return. She then opened the door of her alcove and went out. Why did not Madame de Lannoy come and inform you instantly? Nothing was certain. Besides, her Majesty had said, Ladies, wait for me, and she did not dare to disobey the queen. How long did the queen remain out of the chamber? 3/4 of an hour. None of her women accompanied her? Only Donna Estefania. Did she afterward return? Yes, but only to take a little rosewood casket with her cipher upon it, and went out again immediately. And when she finally returned, did she bring that casket with her? No. Does Madame de Lannoy know what is in the casket? Yes, the diamond studs which His Majesty gave the queen. And she came back without this casket? Yes. Madame de Lannoy, then, is of the opinion that she gave it to Buckingham? She is sure of it. How can she be so? In the course of the day, Madame de Lannoy, in her quality of tire-woman of the queen, looked for this casket, appeared uneasy at not finding it, and at length asked information of the queen. And then the queen? The queen became exceedingly red, and replied that, having in the evening broken one of those studs, she had sent it to her goldsmith to be repaired. He must be called upon, and as to ascertain if the thing be true or not. I have just been with him. And the goldsmith? The goldsmith has heard nothing of it. Well, well, Rochefort, that is, all is not lost, and perhaps everything is for the best. The fact is that I do not doubt your eminence's genius will repair the blunders of his agent. Is that it? That is exactly what I was going to say, if your eminence had let me finish my sentence. Meanwhile, do you know where the Duchess de Chevreuse and the Duke of Buckingham are now concealed? No, Monseigneur. My people could tell me nothing on that lead. But I know. Yes, Monseigneur? Yes. Or at least I guess. They were one in Rue de Vaugirard, number 25, the other in Rue de la Harpe, number 75. Does your eminence command that they both be instantly arrested? It will be too late. They will be gone. But still, we can make sure that they are so. Take 10 of my guardsmen, and search the 2 houses thoroughly. Instantly, Monseigneur. And Rochefort went hastily out of the apartment. The cardinal, being left alone, reflected for an instant, and then rang the bell a 3rd time. The same officer appeared. Bring the prisoner in again, said the cardinal. Monsieur Bonacieux was introduced afresh, and upon a sign from the cardinal, the officer retired. You have deceived me, said the cardinal sternly. Cried Bonacieux, I deceive your eminence. Your wife, in going to Rue de la Vaugirard and Rue de la Harpe, did not go to find linen drapers. Then why did she go? Just God? She went to meet the Duchess de Chevreuse and the Duke of Buckingham. Yes, cried Bonacieux, recalling all his remembrances of the circumstances. Yes, that's it. Your eminence is right. I told my wife several times that it was surprising that linen drapers should live in such houses as those, in houses that had no signs. But she always laughed at me. Ah, Monseigneur, continued Bonacieux, throwing himself at his eminence's feet. Ah, how truly you are the cardinal, the great cardinal, the man of genius whom all the world reveres. The cardinal, however, contemptible, might be the triumph gained over the vulgar, being as Bonacieux did not the less enjoy it for an instant. Then, almost immediately, as if a fresh thought has occurred, a smile played upon his lips, and he said, offering his hand to the mercer, Rise, my friend. You are a worthy man. The cardinal has touched me with his hand. I have touched the hand of the great man, cried Bonacieux. The great man has called me his friend. Yes, my friend, yes, said the cardinal, with that paternal tone which he sometimes knew how to assume, but which deceived none who knew him. And as you have been unjustly suspected,
Well, you must be indemnified. Here, take this purse of 100 pistols, and pardon me. I pardon you, Monseigneur, said Bonacieux, hesitating to take the purse, fearing, doubtless, that this pretended gift was but a pleasantry. But you are able to have me arrested, you are able to have me tortured, you are able to have me hanged. You are the master, and I could not have the least word to say. Pardon you, Monseigneur. You cannot mean that. Ah, my dear Monsieur Bonacieux, you are generous in this matter. I see it, and I thank you for it. Thus, then, you will take this bag, and you will go away without being too malcontent. I go away enchanted. Farewell, then, or rather, au revoir. Whenever Monseigneur wishes, I shall be firmly at the orders of His Eminence. That will be often, be assured, for I have found your conversation quite charming. Oh, Monseigneur! Au revoir, Monsieur Bonacieux, au revoir. And the cardinal made him a sign with his hand, to which Bonacieux replied by bowing to the ground. He then went out backward, and, when he was in the antechamber, the cardinal heard him, in his enthusiasm, crying aloud, Long life to the Monseigneur! Long life to his Eminence! Long life to the great cardinal! The cardinal listened with a smile to this vociferous manifestation of the feelings of Monsieur Bonacieux, and then, when Bonacieux's cries were no longer audible, Good, said he, that man would henceforth lay down his life for me. The cardinal began to examine with the greatest attention the map of La Rochelle, which, as we have said, lay open on the desk, tracing with a pencil the line in which the famous dike was to pass, which, 18 months later, shut up the port of the besieged city. As he was in the deepest of his strategic meditations, the door opened, and Rochefort returned. Well, said the cardinal, eagerly rising with a promptitude which proved the degree of importance he attached to the commission which he had charged the count. Well, said the latter, a young man of about 26 or 28 years of age, and a man from 35 to 40 have indeed lodged at the two houses pointed out by your eminence. But the woman left last night, and the man this morning. It was they, cried the cardinal, looking at the clock, and now it is too late to have them pursued. The Duchess is at Tours, the Duke at Boulogne. It is in London they must be found. What are your eminence's orders? Not a word of what has passed. Let the queen remain in perfect security. Let her be ignorant that we know her secret. Let her believe that we are in search of some conspiracy or other. Send me the keeper of the seals, Seguier. And that man, what has your eminence done with him? What man? Asked the cardinal. That Bonacieux. I have done with him all that could be done. I have made him a spy upon his wife. The Comte de Rochefort bowed like a man who acknowledges the superiority of the master as great, and retired. Left alone, the cardinal seated himself again and wrote a letter which he secured with his special seal. Then he rang. The officer entered for the fourth time. Tell Vitre to come to me, said he, and tell him to get ready for a journey. An instant after, the man he asked for was before him, booted and spurred. Vitre, said he, you will go with all speed to London. You must not stop an instant on the way. You will deliver this letter to Milady. Here is an order for 200 pistols. Call upon my treasurer and get the money. You shall have as much again if you are back within 6 days and have executed your commission well. The messenger, without replying a single word, bowed, took the letter with the order for the 200 pistols, and retired. Here is what the letter contained. Milady, be at the first ball at which the Duke of Buckingham shall be present. He will wear on his 12 diamond studs. Get as near to him as you can, and cut off 2. As soon as these studs shall be in your possession, inform me. Ooh. They think he did it, but the queen turned him down. Chapter 15, Men of the Robe and Men of the Sword. On the day after those events had taken place, Athos not having reappeared, Monsieur de Treville was informed by D'Artagnan and Porthos of the circumstance. As to Aramis, he had asked for leave of absence for 5 days, and he was gone. It was said to ruin on family business. Monsieur de Treville was the father of his soldiers. The lowest or the least known of them, as soon as he assumed the uniform of the company, was as sure of his aid and support as if he had been his own brother. He repaired then instantly to the office of the lieutenant colonel. The officer who commanded the post of the Red Cross was sent for, and by successive inquiries they learned that Athos was then lodged in Fort Levique. Athos had passed through all the examinations we have seen Bonacieux undergo. We were present at the scene in which the two captives were confronted with each other. Athos, who had till that time said nothing for fear that D'Artagnan interrupted in his turn, should not have the time necessary, from this moment declared that his name was Athos, and not D'Artagnan. He added that he did not know either Monsieur or Madame Bonacieux, that he had never spoken to the one or the other, that he had come at about 10 o'clock in the evening to pay a visit to his friend Monsieur D'Artagnan, but that till that hour he had been at Monsieur de Treville's, where he had dined. 20 witnesses, added he, could attest to the fact, and he named several distinguishing gentlemen, and among them was Monsieur le Duc de la Tremblay. The second commissary was as much bewildered as the first had been by the simple and firm declaration of the musketeer, upon whom he was anxious to take the revenge which men of the robe like at all times to gain over men of the sword. But the name of Monsieur de Treville and that of Monsieur de la Tremblay commanded a little reflection. Athos was then sent to the cardinal, but unfortunately the cardinal was at the Louvre with the king. It was precisely at this moment that Monsieur de Treville, on leaving the residence of the lieutenant criminel and the governor of Fort Levique without being able to find Athos, arrived at the palace. As captain of the Musketeers, Monsieur de Treville had the right of entry at all times. It is well known how violent the king's prejudices were against the queen, and how carefully these prejudices were kept up by the cardinal, who, in affairs of intrigue, mistrusted women infinitely more than men. One of the grand causes of this prejudice was the friendship of Anne of Austria for Madame de Chevreuse. These two women gave him more uneasiness than the war with Spain, the quarrel with England, or the embarrassment of the finances. In his eyes, and to his conviction, Madame de Chevreuse not only served the queen in her political intrigues, but, what tormented him still more, in her amorous intrigues. At the first word the cardinal spoke of Madame de Chevreuse, who, though exiled to Tours, had believed to be in that city, had come to Paris, remained there 5 days, and outwitted the police. The king flew into a furious passion. Capricious and unfaithful, the king wished to be called Louis the Just and Louis the Chaste. Posterity will find a difficulty in understanding this character, which history explains only by facts and never by reason. But when the cardinal added that not only Madame de Chevreuse had been in Paris, but still further that the queen had renewed with her one of those mysterious correspondences, which at that time was named cabal. When he affirmed that he, the cardinal, was about to unravel the most closely twisted thread of this intrigue, that at the moment of arresting in the very act, with all the proofs about her, the queen's emissary to the exiled duchess, a musketeer had dared to interrupt the course of justice violently, by falling sword in hand upon the honest men of the law, charged with investigating impartially the whole affair in order to place it before the eyes of the king. Louis XIII could not contain himself, and he made a step toward the queen's apartment with that pale and mute indignation which, when it broke out, led this prince to the commission of the most pitiless cruelty. And yet, in all this, the cardinal had not yet said a word about the Duke of Buckingham. At this instant, Monsieur de Treville entered, cool, polite, and in irreproachable costume. Informed of what had passed by the presence of the cardinal and the alteration of the king's countenance, Monsieur de Treville felt himself something like Samson before the Philistines. Louis XIII had already placed his hand on the knob of the door. At the noise of Monsieur de Treville's entrance, he turned around. "You arrive in good time, monsieur," said the king, who, with his passions were raised to a certain point, could not dissemble. "I have learned some fine things concerning your musketeers." "And I," said Treville coldly, "I have some pretty things to tell your majesty concerning these gownsmen." "What?" said the king with hauteur. "I give the honor to inform your majesty," continued Monsieur de Treville in the same tone, "that a party of procureurs, commissaries, and men of the police, very estimable people, but very inveterate, as it appears, against the uniform, have taken upon themselves to arrest in a house, to lead away through the open street, and throw into Fort Levique, all upon an order which they have refused to show me, one of my, or rather your musketeers, sire, of irreproachable conduct, of an almost illustrious reputation, and whom your majesty knows favorably, Monsieur Athos." "Athos," said the king mechanically. "Yes, Certainly I know that name. Let your majesty remember, said Treville, that Monsieur Athos is the musketeer who, in the annoying duel which you are acquainted with, had the misfortune to wound Monsieur de Cossé so seriously. A propos, monseigneur, continued Treville, addressing the cardinal, Monsieur de Chassac is quite recovered, is he not? Thank you, said the cardinal, biting his lips with anger. Athos then went to pay a visit to one of his friends absent at the time, continued Treville, to a young Béarnais, a cadet in his Majesty's guards, the company of Monsieur Desessarade. But scarcely had he arrived at his friend's and taken up a book while waiting his return, when a mixed crowd of bailiffs and soldiers came and laid siege to the house, broke open several doors. The cardinal made the king a sign, which signified, "That was on account of the affair about which I spoke to you." We all know that, interrupted the king, for all that was done for our service. Then, said Treville, it was also for your majesty's service that one of my musketeers, who was innocent, has been seized, that he has been placed between two guards like a malefactor, and that this gallant man, who has 10 times shed his blood in your majesty's service and is ready to shed it again, has been paraded through the midst of an insolent populace? Bah! said the king, who began to be shaken. Was it so managed? Monsieur de Treville, said the cardinal, with the greatest phlegm, does not your majesty, Monsieur de Treville does not tell your majesty that this innocent musketeer, this gallant man, had only an hour before attacked, sword in hand, 4 commissaries of inquiry, who were delegated by myself to examine into an affair of the highest importance. I defy your eminence to prove it, cried Treville, with his Gascon freedom and military frankness. For 1 hour before, Monsieur Athos, who, I will confide it to your majesty, is really a man of his highest quality, did me the honor, after having dined with me, to be conversing in the saloon of my hotel with the Duc de la Trémouille and the Comte de Châlus, who happened to be there. The king looked at the cardinal. A written examination attests it, said the cardinal, replying aloud to the mute interrogation of his majesty. And the ill-treated people have drawn up the following, which I have the honor to present to your majesty. And is the written report of the gownsman to be placed in comparison with the word of honor of swordsmen? Replied Treville haughtily. Come, come, Treville, hold your tongue, said the king. If his eminence entertains any suspicion against one of my musketeers, said Treville, the justice of Monsieur the Cardinal is so well known that I demand an inquiry. In the house in which the judicial inquiry was made, continued the impassive cardinal, there lodges, I believe, a young Béarnais friend of the Musketeers. Your eminence means Monsieur d'Artagnan. I mean a young man whom you patronize, Monsieur de Treville. Yes, your eminence, it is the same. Do you not suspect this young man of having given bad counsel? To Athos, to a man double his age? Interrupted Treville. No, monseigneur. Besides, D'Artagnan passed the evening with me. Well, said the cardinal, everybody seems to have passed the evening with you. Does your eminence doubt my word? Said Treville, with a brow flushed with anger. No, God forbid, said the cardinal. Only, at what hour was he with you? Oh, as to that, I can speak positively, your eminence. For as he came in, I remarked that it was about 9:30 by the clock, although I had believed it to be later. At what hour did he leave your hotel? At 10:30, an hour after the event. Well, replied the cardinal, who could not for an instant suspect the loyalty of Treville, and who felt that the victory was escaping him. Well, but Athos was taken in the house of the Rue des Fossés. Is one friend forbidden to visit another, or a musketeer of my company to fraternize with a guard of Dessessart's company? Yes, when the house where he fraternizes is suspected. That house is suspected, Treville, said the king. Perhaps you did not know it? Indeed, sire, I did not. The house may be suspected, but I deny that it is so on the part of it inhabited by Monsieur d'Artagnan, for I can affirm, sire, if I can believe what he says, that there does not exist a more devoted servant of your majesty, or a more profound admirer of Monsieur the Cardinal. Was it not this D'Artagnan who wounded Jussac one day, in the unfortunate encounter which took place near the convent of the Carmes aux Ourcles? Asked the king. looking at the cardinal, who colored with vexation. And the next day, bonjour, yes, sire, yes, it is the same, and your majesty has good memory. Come, how shall we decide? Said the king. That concerns your majesty more than me, said the cardinal. I should affirm the culpability. And I deny it, said Treville. But his majesty has judges, and these judges will decide. That is best, said the king. Send the case before the judges. It is their business to judge, and they shall judge. Only, replied Treville, it is a sad thing that in the unfortunate times in which we live, the purest life, the most incontestable virtue, cannot exempt a man from infamy and persecution. The army, I will answer for it, will be but little pleased at being exposed to rigorous treatment on account of police affairs. The expression was imprudent, but Monsieur de Treville launched it with knowledge of his cause. He was desirous of an explosion, because in that case the mine throws forth fire, and fire enlightens. Police affairs, cried the king, taking up Treville's words. Police affairs? And what do you know about them, monsieur? Meddle with your musketeers, and do not annoy me in this way. It appears, according to your account, that if by mischance a musketeer is arrested, France is in danger. What a noise about a musketeer! I would arrest 10 of them, ventrebleu, 100 even, and the company, and I would not allow a whisper. From that moment they are suspected by your majesty, said Treville. The musketeers are guilty. Therefore, you see me prepared to surrender my sword. For after having accused my soldiers, there can be no doubt that Monsieur the Cardinal will end by accusing me. It is best to constitute myself as at once a prisoner with Athos, who is already arrested, and with D'Artagnan, who most probably will be. Gascon-headed man, will you have done? Said the king. Sire, replied Treville, without lowering his voice in the least, either order my musketeer to be restored to me, or let him be tried. He shall be tried, said the cardinal. Well, so much the better, for in that case I shall demand of his majesty permission to plead for him. The king feared an outbreak. If his eminence, said he, did not have personal motives. The cardinal saw what the king was about to say and interrupted him. Pardon me, said he, but the instant your majesty considers me a prejudiced judge, I withdraw. Come, said the king. Will you swear by my father that Athos was at your residence during the event, and that he took no part in it? By your glorious father, and by yourself, whom I love and venerate above all the world, I swear it. Be so kind as to reflect, sire, said the cardinal. If we release the prisoner thus, we shall never know the truth. Athos may always be found, replied Treville, ready to answer when it shall please the gownsmen to interrogate him. He will not desert Monsieur the Cardinal, be assured of that. I will answer for him. No, he will not desert, said the king. He can always be found, as Treville says. Besides, added he, lowering his voice and looking with a suppliant air at the cardinal, let us give them apparent security. That is policy. This policy of Louis XIII made Richelieu smile. Order it as you please, sire. You possess the right of pardon. The right of pardoning only applies to the guilty, said Treville, who was determined to have the last word, and my musketeer is innocent. It is not mercy, then, that you are about to accord, sire. It is justice. And the king? And he is in the Fort Levique, said the king. Yes, sire, in solitary confinement, in a dungeon like the lowest criminal. The devil, murmured the king. What must be done? Sign an order for his release, and all will be said, replied the cardinal. I believe, with your majesty, that Monsieur de Treville's guarantee is more than sufficient. Treville bowed very respectfully, with a joy that was not unmixed with fear. He would have preferred an obstinate resistance on the part of the cardinal to this sudden yielding. The king signed for the order for release, and Treville carried it away without delay. As he was about to leave the presence, the cardinal gave him a friendly smile and said, A perfect harmony reigns, sire, between the leaders and the soldiers of your musketeers, which must be profitable for the service and honorable to all. You will play me some dog's trick or other, and that immediately, said Treville. One has never the last word with such a man. But let us be quick. The king may change his mind in an hour, and, at all events, it is more difficult to replace a man in the Fort Levique or the Bastille who has got out than to keep a prisoner there who is in. Monsieur de Treville made his entrance triumphantly into Fort Levique, whence he delivered the musketeer, whose peaceful indifference had not for a moment abandoned him. The first time he saw D'Artagnan, You have come off well, said he to him. There is your Jussac thrust paid for.
There still remains that of Bernajoux, but you must not be too confident. As to the rest, Monsieur de Treville had good reason to mistrust the cardinal, and to think that all was not over, for scarcely had the captain of the Musketeers closed the door after him, than his eminence said to the king, "Now that we are at length by ourselves, we will, if your majesty pleases, converse seriously. Sire Buckingham has been in Paris 5 days, and only left this morning." Bum bum bum. Chapter 16, in which Monsieur Seguier, Keeper of the Seals, looks more than once for the bell. That's a long title. It is impossible to form an idea of the impression these few words made upon Louis XIII. He grew pale and red alternately, and the cardinal saw at once that he had recovered by a single blow all the ground he had lost. "Buckingham in Paris!" cried he. "And why does he come? To conspire, no doubt, with your enemies, the Huguenots and the Spaniards." "No, pardieu, no! To conspire against my honor with Madame de Chevreuse, Madame de Longueville, and the Condes? Oh, sire, what an idea! The queen is too virtuous, and besides, loves your majesty too well." "Woman is weak," said Monsieur Cardinal, said the king, "and as to loving me much, I have my own opinion as to that love. I not the less maintain," said the cardinal, "that the Duke of Buckingham came to Paris for a project wholly political. And I am sure that he came for quite another purpose, Monsieur Cardinal. But if the queen be guilty, let her tremble." "Indeed," said the cardinal, "whatever repugnance I may have to directing my mind to such a treason, your majesty compels me to think of it. Madame de Lannoy, whom, according to your majesty's command, I have frequently interrogated, told me this morning that the night before last her majesty sat up very late, that this morning she wept much, and that she was writing all day." You know what's interesting? All the leaders guys are being misogynistic, but so far the women are like the most honorable and clever characters in the book. Where was I? Okay. "That's it," cried the king. "To him, no doubt. Cardinal, I must have the queen's papers. But how to take them, sire? It seems to me that it is neither your majesty nor myself who can charge himself with such a mission." "How did they act with regard to the Marshal d'Ancre?" cried the king, in the highest state of choler. "First her closets were thoroughly searched, and then she herself." "The Marshal d'Ancre was no more than the Marshal d'Ancre, a Florentine adventurer, sire, and that was all, while the august spouse of your majesty is Anne of Austria, Queen of France, that is to say, one of the greatest princesses in the world." "She is not the less guilty, Monsieur Duke. The more she has forgotten the high position in which she was placed, the more degrading is her fall. Besides, I long ago determined to put an end to all these petty intrigues of policy and love. She has near her a certain Laporte, who I believe is the mainspring of all this, I confess," said the cardinal. "You think, then, as I do, that she deceives me?" said the king. "I believe, and I repeat it to your majesty, that the queen conspires against the power of the king, but I have not said against his honor. And I tell you against both. I tell you the queen does not love me. I tell you she loves another. I tell you she loves that infamous Buckingham. Why did you not have him arrested while in Paris?" "Arrest the duke? Arrest the prime minister of King Charles I? Think of it, sire. What a scandal! And if the suspicions of your majesty, which I still continue to doubt, should prove to have any foundation, what a terrible disclosure, what a fearful scandal! But as he exposed himself like a vagabond or a thief, he should have been—" Louis XIII stopped, terrified at what he was about to say, while Richelieu, stretching out his neck, waited uselessly for the word which had died on the lips of the king. "He should have been—" "Nothing," said the king, "nothing. But all the time he was in Paris, you, of course, did not lose sight of him?" "No, sire." "Where did he lodge?" "Rue de la Harpe, number 75. "Where is that?" "By the side of the Luxembourg." "And you are certain that the queen and he did not see each other?" "I believe the queen to have too high a sense of her duty, sire. But they have corresponded. It is to him that the queen has been writing all the day. Monsieur Duke, I must have those letters." "Sire, notwithstanding, Monsieur Duke, at whatever price it may be, I will have them." I would, however, beg your majesty to observe, do you then also join in betraying me, Monsieur Cardinal, by thus always opposing my will? Are you also in accord with Spain and England and Madame de Chevreuse and the Queen? Sire, replied the cardinal, sighing, I believe myself secure from such a suspicion. Monsieur Cardinal, you have heard me. I will have those letters. There is but one way. What is that? That would be to charge Monsieur de Séguier, the keeper of the seals, with this mission. The matter enters completely into the duties of the post. Let him be sent for instantly. He is most likely at my hotel. I requested him to call, and when I came to the Louvre I left orders if he came to desire him to wait. Let him be sent for instantly. Your Majesty's orders shall be executed, but what? The Queen will perhaps refuse to obey. My orders? Yes, if she is ignorant that these orders come from the King. Well, that she may have no doubt on the head myself, I will go and inform her myself. Your Majesty will not forget that I have done everything in my power to prevent a rupture. Yes, Duke, yes. I know you are very indulgent toward the Queen. Too indulgent, perhaps. We shall have occasion, I warn you, at some future period to speak of that, whenever it shall please your Majesty. But I shall be always happy and proud, sire, to sacrifice myself to the harmony which I desire to see reign between you and the Queen of France. Very well, Cardinal, very well. But meantime, send for Monsieur, the keeper of the seals. I will go to the Queen. And Louis XIII, opening the door of communication, passed into the corridor which led from his apartments to those of Anne of Austria. The Queen was in the midst of her women. Madame de Guertat, Madame de Zabel, Madame de Montespan, and Madame de Guemelin. In a corner was the Spanish companion, Donna Estefania, who had followed her from Madrid. Madame Guemelin was reading aloud, and everybody was listening to her with attention, with the exception of the Queen, who had, on the contrary, desired this reading in order that she might be able, while feigning to listen, to pursue the thread of her own thoughts. These thoughts, gilded as they were by a last reflection of love, were not the less sad. Anne of Austria, deprived of the confidence of her husband, pursued by the hatred of the cardinal, who could not pardon her for having repulsed a more tender feeling, having before her eyes the example of the Queen Mother, whom that hatred had tormented all her life. Though Marie de Medicis, if the memoirs of the time are to be believed, had begun by according to the cardinal that sentiment which Anne of Austria always refused him, Anne of Austria had seen her most devoted servants fall around her, her most intimate confidants, her dearest favorites. Like those unfortunate persons endowed with a fatal gift, she brought misfortune upon everything she touched. Her friendship was a fatal sign which called down persecution. Madame de Chevreuse and Madame de Bernay were exiled, and Laporte did not conceal from his mistress that he expected to be arrested every instant. It was at the moment when she was plunged in the deepest of darkness of these reflections that the door of the chamber opened, and the king entered. The reader hushed herself instantly. All the ladies rose, and there was a profound silence. As to the king, he made no demonstration of politeness, only stopping before the queen. Madame, said he, you are about to receive a visit from the chancellor, who will communicate certain matters to you with which I have charged him. The unfortunate queen was constantly threatened with divorce, exile, and even trial, turned pale under her rouge, and could not refrain from saying, But why this visit, sire? What can the chancellor have to say to me that your majesty could not say yourself? The king turned upon his heel without reply, and almost at the same instant the captain of the guards, Monsieur de Gouton, announced the visit of the chancellor. When the chancellor appeared, the king had already gone out by another door. The chancellor entered, half smiling, half blushing. As we shall probably meet with him again in the course of our history, it may be well for our readers to be made at once acquainted with him. This chancellor was a pleasant man. He was Desroches-le-Mas, canon of Notre Dame, who had formerly been valet of a bishop, who introduced him to his eminence as a perfectly devout man. The cardinal trusted him, and therein found his advantage. There are many stories related of him, and among them this. After a wild youth he had retired into a convent, then to expiate, at least for some time, the follies of adolescence. On entering this holy place, the poor penitent was unable to shut the door, so close as to prevent the passions he fled from entering with him. He was incessantly attacked by them, and the superior, to whom he had confided this misfortune, wishing as much as in him lay to free him from them, had advised them, in order to conjure away the tempting demon, to have recourse to the bell rope, and ring with his might. At that denunciating sound, the monks would be rendered aware that temptation was besieging a brother, and all the community would go to prayers. This advice appeared good to the future chancellor. He conjured the evil spirit with abundance of prayers, offered up by the monks. But the devil does not suffer himself to be easily dispossessed from a place in which he has fixed his garrison. In proportion as they redoubled the exorcisms, he redoubled the temptations, so that day and night the bell was ringing full swing, announcing the extreme desire for mortification which the penitent experienced. The monks had no longer an instant of repose. By day they did nothing but ascend and descend the steps which led to the chapel. At night, in addition, the complines and matins. They were further obliged to leap 20 times out of their beds and prostrate themselves on the floor of their cells. It is not known whether it was the devil who gave way, or the monks who grew tired, but within 3 months the penitent reappeared in the world with the reputation of being the most terrible possessed that ever existed. On leaving the convent, he entered into the magistracy, became president on the place of his uncle, embraced the cardinal's party, which did not prove want of sagacity, became chancellor, served his eminence with zeal in his hatred against the queen mother and his vengeance against Anne of Austria, stimulated the judges in the affair of Calais, encouraged the attempts of Madame de Lafayette, chief gamekeeper of France, or Monsieur de la Misfils. Then, at length, invested with the entire confidence of the cardinal, a confidence which he had so well earned, he received the singular commission for the execution of which he presented himself in the queen's apartments. The queen was still standing when he entered, but scarcely had she perceived him, then she reseated herself in the armchair, and made a sign to her women to resume their cushions and stools, with an air of supreme hauteur, said, "What do you desire, monsieur, and with what object do you present yourself here?" "To take, madame, in the name of the king, and without prejudice to the respect which I have the honor to owe to your majesty, a close examination into all your papers." "How, monsieur, an investigation of my papers? Mine? Truly this is an indignity." "Be kind enough to pardon me, madame, but in this circumstance I am but the instrument which the king employs. Has not his majesty just left you, and has he not himself asked you to prepare for this visit?" "Search then, monsieur. I am a criminal, as it appears. Estefania, give up the keys of my drawers and my desks." For form's sake, the chancellor paid a visit to the pieces of furniture named, but he well knew that it was not in a piece of furniture that the queen would place the important letter she had written that day. When the chancellor had opened and shut 20 times the drawers of the secretaries, it became necessary, whatever hesitation he might experience, it became necessary, I say, to come to the conclusion of the affair, that is to say, to search the queen herself. The chancellor advanced, therefore, toward Anne of Austria, and said with a very perplexed and embarrassed air, "And now it remains for me to make the principal examination." "What is that?" asked the queen, who did not understand, or rather was not willing to understand. "His Majesty is certain that a letter has been written by you during the day. He knows that it has not yet been sent to its address. This letter is not in your table, nor on your secretary, and yet this letter must be somewhere." "Would you dare to lift your hand to your queen?" said Anne of Austria, drawing herself up to her full height and fixing her eyes upon the chancellor with an expression almost threatening. "I am a faithful subject of the king, madame, and all that his majesty commands I shall do." "Well, it is true," said Anne of Austria, "and the spies of the cardinal have served him faithfully. I have written a letter today. That letter is not yet gone. The letter is here," and the queen laid her beautiful hand on her bosom. "Then give me that letter, madame," said the chancellor. "I will give it to none but the king, monsieur," said Anne. "If the king had desired that letter should be given to him, madame, he would have demanded it of you himself. But I repeat to you, I am charged with reclaiming it, and if you do not give it up—" "Well, he has then charged me to take it from you." "How? What do you say?" "That my orders go far, madame, and that I am authorized to seek for the suspected paper, even on the person of your majesty." "What horror!" cried the queen. "Be kind enough then, madame, to act more compliantly. The conduct is infamously violent. Do you know that, monsieur? The king commands it, madame. Excuse me. I will not suffer it. No, no. I would rather die, cried the queen, in whom the imperious blood of Spain and Austria began to rise. The chancellor made a profound reverence. Then, with the intention quite patent of not drawing back a foot from the accomplishment of the commission with which he was charged, and as the attendant of an executioner might have done in a chamber of torture, he approached Anne of Austria, from whose eyes at the same instant sprang tears of rage. The queen was, as we have said, of great beauty. The commission might well be called delicate, and the king had reached, in his jealousy of Buckingham, the point of not being jealous with anyone else. Without doubt, the Chancellor Seguier looked about at that moment for the rope of his famous bell, but not finding it, he summoned his. Oh my gosh, this is so messed up. Not finding it, he summoned his resolution and searched forth his hands toward the place where the queen had acknowledged the paper was to be found. Oh my gosh. Anne of Austria took one step backward, became so pale that it might be said she was dying, and leaning with her left hand upon a table behind her to keep herself from falling, she, with her right hand, drew the paper from her bosom and held it out to the keeper of the seals. There, monsieur, there is that letter, cried the queen with a broken and trembling voice. Take it, and deliver me from your odious presence. Chancellor, who, in this part, trembled with an emotion easily to be conceived, took the letter, bowed to the ground, and retired. The door was scarcely closed upon him when the queen sank, half fainting, into the arms of her women. The chancellor carried the letter to the king, without having read a single word of it. The king took it with a trembling hand, looked for the address, which was wanting, became very pale, opened it slowly. Then, seeing by the first words that it was addressed to the King of Spain, he read it rapidly. It was nothing but a plan of attack against the cardinal. The queen pressed her brother and the Emperor of Austria to appear to be wounded, as they really were, by the policy of Richelieu, the eternal object of which was the abasement of the House of Austria, to declare war against France, and, as a condition of peace, to insist upon the dismissal of the cardinal. But as to love, there was not a single word about it in all in the letter. The king, quite delighted, inquired if the cardinal was still at the Louvre. He was told that his eminence awaited the orders of his majesty in the business cabinet. The king went straight to him. There, Duke, said he, you were right, and I was wrong. The whole intrigue is political, and there is not the least question of love in this letter. But, on the other hand, there is abundant question of you. The cardinal took the letter and read it with the greatest attention. Then, when he had arrived at the end of it, he read it a second time. Well, your majesty, said he, you see how far my enemies go. They menace you with 2 wars if you do not dismiss me. In your place, in truth, sire, I should yield to such powerful instance, and on my part, it would be a real happiness to withdraw from public affairs. What say you, Duke? I say, sire, that my health is sinking under these excessive struggles and these never-ending labors. I say that according to all probability, I shall not be able to undergo the fatigues of the siege of La Rochelle, and that it would be far better that you should appoint there either Monsieur de Condé, Monsieur de Beausoleil, or some valiant gentleman whose business is war, and not me, who am a churchman, and who am constantly turned aside from my real vocation to look after matters for which I have no aptitude. You would be the happier for it at home, sire, and I do not doubt you would be the greater for it abroad. Monsieur Duke, said the king, I understand you. Be satisfied, all who are named in that letter shall be punished as they deserved, even the queen herself. What do you say, sire? God forbid that the queen should suffer the least inconvenience or uneasiness on my account. She has always believed me, sire, to be her enemy, although your majesty can bear witness that I have always taken her part warmly, even against you. Oh, if she betrayed your majesty on the side of your honor, it would be quite another thing, and I should be the first to say, no grace, sire, no grace for the guilty. Happily, there is nothing of the kind, and your majesty has just acquired a new proof of it. That is true, monsieur cardinal, said the king, and you are right, as you always are. But the queen, not the less, deserves all my anger. It is you, sire, who have now incurred hers, and, even if she were to be seriously offended, I could well understand it. Your majesty has treated her with a severity. It is thus I will always treat my enemies and yours, Duke, however high they may be placed, and whatever peril I may incur in acting severely toward them. The queen is my enemy, but is not yours, sire. On the contrary, she is a devoted, submissive, and irreproachable wife. Allow me, then, sire, to intercede for her with your majesty. Let her humble herself, then, and come to me first. On the contrary, sire, set the example. You have committed the first wrong, since it is you who have suspected the queen. What? I make the first advances? Said the king. Never. Sire, I entreat you to do so. Besides, in what manner can I make advances first? By doing a thing which you know will be agreeable to her. What is that? Give a ball. You know how much the queen loves dancing. I will answer for it, and her resentment will not hold out against such an attention. Monsieur Cardinal, you know that I do not like worldly pleasures. The queen will only be the more grateful to you, as she knows your antipathy for the amusement. Besides, it will be an opportunity for her to wear those beautiful diamonds which you gave her recently on her birthday, and with which she has since had no occasion to adorn herself. Uh-oh. We shall see, Monsieur Cardinal, we shall see, said the king, who, in his joy at finding the queen guilty of a crime which he cared little about, and innocent of a fault of which he had great dread, was ready to make up all differences with her. We shall see, but upon my honor you are too indulgent toward her. Sire, said the cardinal, leave severity to your ministers. Clemency is a royal virtue. Employ it, and you will find that you will derive advantage therein. Thereupon the cardinal, hearing the clock strike 11, bowed low, asking permission of the king to retire, and supplicating him to come to a good understanding of the queen. Anne of Austria, who, in consequence of the seizure of her letter, expected reproaches, was much astonished the next day to see the king make some attempts at reconciliation with her. Her first movement was repellent. Her womanly pride and her queenly dignity had both been so cruelly offended that she could not come round at first advance, but over-persuaded by the advice of her women, she at least had the appearance of beginning to forget. The king took advantage of this favorable moment to tell her that he had the intention of shortly giving a fete. A fete was so rare a thing for poor Anne of Austria that at this announcement, as the cardinal had predicted, the last trace of her resentment disappeared, if not from her heart, at least from her countenance. She asked upon what day this fete would take place, but the king replied that he must consult the cardinal upon that head. Indeed, every day the king asked the cardinal when this fete should take place, and every day the cardinal, under some pretext, deferred fixing it. 10 days passed away thus. On the 8th day, the scene we have described, the cardinal received a letter with the London stamp, which only contained these lines: I have them, but I am unable to leave London for want of money. Send me 500 pistoles, and 4 or 5 days after I have received them, I shall be in Paris. On the same day the cardinal received this letter, the king put his customary question to him. Richelieu counted on his fingers and said to himself, She will arrive, says, 4 or 5 days after having received the money. It will require 4 or 5 days for the transmission of the money, 4 or 5 days for the return. That makes 10 days. Now, allowing for the contrary winds, accidents, and woman's weakness, there are 12 days. Well, Monsieur Duke, said the king, have you made your calculations? Yes, sire. Today is the 20th of September. The aldermen of the city gave a fete on the 3rd of October. That will fall in wonderfully well. You will not appear to have gone out of your way to please the queen. Then the cardinal added, A propos, sire, do not forget to tell her majesty the evening before the fete that you should like to see how her diamond studs become her. Dun dun dun! Dang. Cardinal's getting her good. Even though she didn't do anything. Bonacieux at home. It was the second time the cardinal had mentioned these diamond studs to the king. Louis XIII was struck with this insistence, and began to fancy that this recommendation concealed some mystery. More than once the king had been humiliated by the cardinal, whose police, without having yet attained the perfection of the modern police, were excellent, being better informed than himself. Even upon what was going on in his own household. He hoped then, in a conversation with Anne of Austria, to obtain some information from that conversation, and afterward to come upon his eminence with some secret, which the cardinal either knew or did not know, but which in either case would raise him infinitely in the eyes of his minister. He went then to the queen, and according to custom accosted her with fresh menaces against those who surrounded her. Anne of Austria lowered her head, allowed the torrent to flow on without replying, hoping that it would cease of itself. But this was not what Louis XIII meant. Louis XIII wanted a discussion from which some light or other might break, convinced as he was that the cardinal had some afterthought, and was preparing for him one of those terrible surprises which his eminence was so skilful in getting up. He arrived at this end by his persistence in accusation. "But," cried Anne of Austria, tired of these vague attacks, "but, sire, you do not tell me all that you have in your heart. What have I done then? Let me know what crime I have committed. It is impossible that your majesty can make all this ado about a letter written to my brother." The king, attacked in a manner so direct, did not know what to answer, and he thought that it was the moment for expressing the desire, which he was not going to have made until evening before the fete. "Madame," said he with dignity, "there will shortly be a ball at the Hotel de Ville. I wish, in my order, to honor our worthy alderman. You should appear in ceremonial costume, and above all, ornamented with the diamond studs which I gave you on your birthday. That is my answer." The answer was terrible. Anne of Austria believed that Louis XIII knew all, and that the cardinal had persuaded him to employ this long dissimulation of 7 or 8 days, which likewise was characteristic. She became excessively pale, leaned her beautiful hand upon a console, which hand appeared then like one of wax, and looking at the king with terror in her eyes, she was unable to reply by a single syllable. "You hear, madame," said the king, who enjoyed the embarrassment to its full extent, but without guessing the cause. "You hear, madame?" "Yes, sire, I hear," stammered the queen. "You will appear at this ball?" "Yes." "With those studs?" "Yes." The queen's paleness, if possible, increased. The king perceived it and enjoyed it with that cold cruelty which was one of the worst sides of his character. "Then it is agreed," said the king, "and that is all I had to say to you." "But on what day will this ball take place?" asked Anne of Austria. Louis XIII felt instinctively that he ought not to reply to this question. The queen, having put it in an almost dying voice, "Oh, very shortly, madame," said he, "but I do not precisely recollect the date of the day. I will ask the cardinal." "It was the cardinal, then, who informed you of this feat?" "Yes, madame," replied the astonished king. "But why do you ask that?" "It was he who told you to invite me to appear with these studs?" "That is to say, madame—" "It was he, sire, it was he!" "Well, and what does it signify whether it was he or I? Is there any crime in this request?" "No, sire." "Then you will appear?" "Yes, sire." "That is well," said the king, retiring. "That is well. I count upon it." The queen made a curtsy, less from etiquette than because her knees were sinking under her. The king went away enchanted. "I am lost," murmured the queen. "Lost, for the cardinal knows all, and it is he who urges on the king, who as yet knows nothing, but will soon know everything. I am lost! My God, my God, my God!" She knelt upon a cushion and prayed with her head buried between her palpitating arms. In fact, her position was terrible. Buckingham had returned to London. Madame de Chevreuse was at Tours, more closely watched than ever. The queen felt certain, without knowing how to tell which, that one of her women had betrayed her. Laporte could not leave the Louvre. She had not a soul in the world in whom she could confide. Thus, while contemplating the misfortune which threatened her and the abandonment in which she was left, she broke out into sobs and tears. "Can I be of service to your majesty?" said all at once a voice full of sweetness and pity. The queen turned sharply round. There could be no deception in the expression of that voice. It was a friend who spoke thus. In fact, at one of the doors which opened into the queen's apartment appeared the pretty Madame Bonacieux. She had been engaged in arranging the dress and linen in a closet when the king entered. She could not get out, and had heard all. The queen uttered a piercing cry at finding herself surprised, for in her trouble she did not at first recognize the young woman who had been given to her by Laporte. "Oh, fear nothing, madame," said the young woman, clasping her hands and weeping herself at the majesty's sorrows. "I am your majesty's, body and soul, and however far I may be from you, however inferior may be my position, I believe I have discovered a means of extricating your majesty from your trouble." "You, oh, heaven, you!" cried the queen. "But look me in the face. I am betrayed on all sides. Can I trust in you?" "Oh, madame!" cried the young woman, falling on her knees. "Upon my soul, I am ready to die for your majesty." This expression sprang from the very bottom of the heart, and, like the first, there was no mistaking it. Yes, continued Madame Bonacieux. Yes, there are traitors here, but by the holy name of the Virgin, I swear that no one is more devoted to your Majesty than I am. Those studs which the king speaks of, you gave them to the Duke of Buckingham, did you not? Those studs were enclosed in a little rosewood box which he held under his arm. Am I deceived? Is it not so, madame? Oh my God, oh my God, murmured the queen, whose teeth chattered with fright. Well, those studs, continued Madame Bonacieux, we must have them back again. Yes, without doubt, it is necessary, cried the queen. But how am I to act? How can it be effected? Someone must be sent to the duke. But who? Who? In whom can I trust? Place the confidence in me, madame. Do me that honor, my queen, and I will find a messenger. But I must write. Oh, yes, that is indispensable. 2 words from the hand of your majesty and your private seal. But these 2 words would bring about my condemnation, divorce, exile. Yes, if they fell into infamous hands. But I will answer for these 2 words being delivered to their address. Oh, my God, I must then place my life, my honor, my reputation in your hands? Yes, yes, madame, you must, and I will save them all. But how? Tell me at least the means. My husband has been at liberty these 2 or 3 days. I have not yet had time to see him again. He is a worthy, honest man who entertains neither love nor hatred for anybody. He will do anything I wish. He will set me out upon receiving an order from me, without knowing what he carries, and he will carry your majesty's letter, without even knowing it is from your majesty, to the address which is on it. The queen took the 2 hands of the young woman, with a burst of emotion, gazed at her as if to read her very heart, and, seeing nothing but sincerity in her beautiful eyes, embraced her tenderly. Do that, cried she, and you will have saved my life. You will have saved my honor. Do not exaggerate the service I have the happiness to render your majesty. I have nothing to save for your majesty. You are only the victim of a perfidious plot. That is true. That is true, my child, said the queen. You are right. Give me, then, that letter, madame. Time presses. The queen ran to a little table on which were ink, paper, and pens. She wrote 2 lines, sealed the letter with her private seal, and gave it to Madame Bonacieux. And now, said the queen, we are forgetting one very necessary thing. What is that, madame? Money. Madame Bonacieux blushed. Yes, that is true, said she, and I will confess to your majesty that my husband— Your husband has none, is that what you would say? He has some, but he is very avaricious. That is his fault, nevertheless. Let your majesty be uneasy. We will find means. And I have none either, said the queen. Those who have read the memoirs of Madame de Motteville will not be astonished at this reply. But wait a minute. Anne of Austria ran to her jewel case. Here, said she, here is a ring of great value, as I have been assured. It came from my brother, the King of Spain. It is mine, and I am at liberty to dispose of it. To dispose of it. Take this ring, raise money with it, and let your husband set out. In an hour you shall be obeyed. You see the address, said the queen, speaking so low that Madame Bonacieux could hardly hear what she said. To my lord, Duke of Buckingham, London. The letter shall be given to himself. Generous girl, cried Anne of Austria. Madame Bonacieux kissed the hands of the queen, concealed the paper in the bosom of her dress, and disappeared with the lightness of a bird. 10 minutes afterward she was at home. As she told the queen, she had not seen her husband since his liberation. She was ignorant of the change that had taken place in him with respect to the cardinal, a change which had since been strengthened by 2 or 3 visits from the Comte de Rochefort, who had become the best friend of Bonacieux, and had persuaded him, without much trouble, that no culpable sentiments had prompted the abduction of his wife, but that it was only a political precaution. She found Monsieur Bonacieux alone. The poor man was recovering with difficulty the order in his house, in which he had found most of the furniture broken, and the closets nearly emptied. Justice not being one of the 3 things which King Solomon names as leaving no traces of their passage. As to the servant, she had run away at the moment of her master's arrest. Terror had had such an effect upon the poor girl that she had never ceased walking from Paris till she reached Burgundy, her native place. The worthy mercer had, immediately upon re-entering his house, informed his wife of his happy return, and his wife had replied by congratulating him, and telling him that the first moment she could steal from her duties should be devoted to paying him a visit. This first moment had been delayed 5 days, which, under any other circumstances, might have appeared rather long to Monsieur Bonacieux, but he had, in the visit he had made to the cardinal and the visitors of Rochefort, had made him ample subjections for reflection, and, as everybody knows, nothing makes time pass more quickly than reflection. This was the more so because Bonacieux's reflections were all rose-colored. Rochefort called him, as his friend, his dear Bonacieux, and never ceased telling him that the cardinal had a great respect for him. The mercer fancied himself already on the high road to honors and fortune. On her side, Madame Bonacieux had also reflected, but it must be admitted, upon something widely different from ambition. In spite of herself, her thoughts constantly reverted to that handsome young man who was so brave and appeared to be so much in love. Married at 18 to Monsieur Bonacieux, having always lived among her husband's friends, people little capable of inspiring any sentiment whatever in a young woman whose heart was above her position, Madame Bonacieux had remained insensible to vulgar seductions. But, at this period, the title of gentleman had great influence with the citizen class, and D'Artagnan was a gentleman. Besides, he wore the uniform of the guards, which, next to that of the Musketeers, was most admired by the ladies. He was, we repeat, handsome, young, and bold. He spoke of love like a man who did love, and was anxious to be loved in return. There was certainly enough in all this to turn a head, only 23 years old, and Madame Bonacieux had just attained that happy period of life. The couple then, although they had not seen each other for 8 days, had during that time serious events had taken place in which both were concerned, accosted each other with a degree of preoccupation. Nevertheless, Bonacieux manifested real joy, and advanced toward his wife with open arms. Madame Bonacieux presented her cheek to him. "Let us talk a little," said she. "How?" said Bonacieux, astonished. "Yes, I have something of the highest importance to tell you." "True," said he, "and I have some questions sufficiently serious to put to you. Describe to me your abduction, I pray you." "Oh, that's of no consequence just now," said Madame Bonacieux. "And what does it concern, then? My captivity? I heard of it the day it happened, but as you are not guilty of any crime, as you are not guilty of any intrigue, as you, in short, knew nothing that could compromise yourself or anybody else, I attached no more importance to it than it merited." "You speak very much at your ease, madame," said Bonacieux, hurt at the little interest his wife had showed him. "Do you know that I was plunged during the day and night in a dungeon of the Bastille? Oh, day and night soon pass away. Let us return to the object that brings me here." "What, that which brings you home to me? Is it not the desire of seeing a husband again from whom you have been separated for a week?" asked the mercer, piqued to the quick. "Yes, that first, and other things afterward. Speak." "It is a thing of the highest interest, and upon which our future fortune perhaps depends." "The complexion of our fortune has changed very much since I saw you, Madame Bonacieux, and I should not be astonished if in the course of a few months it were to excite the envy of many folks." "Yes, particularly if you follow the instructions I am about to give you." "Me?" "Yes, you. There is good and holy action to be performed, monsieur, and much money to be gained at the same time." Madame Bonacieux knew that in talking of money to her husband, she took him on his weak side. But a man, were he even a mercer, when he had talked for 10 minutes with Cardinal Richelieu, is no longer the same man. "Much money to be gained," said Bonacieux, protruding his lip. "Yes, much." "About how much?" "1,000 pistoles, perhaps." "What you demand of me is serious, then?" "It is, indeed." "What must be done?" "You must go away immediately. I will give you a paper which you must not part with on any account, and which you will deliver into the proper hands." "And whither am I to go?" "To London." "I go to London? Go too? You jest. I have no business in London." "But others wish that you should go there." "But what are those others?" "I warn you that I will never again work in the dark, and that I will know not only to what I expose myself, but for whom I expose myself." "An illustrious person sends you. An illustrious person awaits you. To recompense will exceed your expectations. That is all I promise you." "More intrigues, nothing but intrigues." "Thank you, madame, I am aware of them now. Monsieur Cardinal has enlightened me on that head." "The cardinal?" cried Madame Bonacieux. "Have you seen the cardinal?" He sent for me, answered the mercer proudly. And you responded to his bidding, you imprudent man? Well, I can't say I had much choice of going or not going, for I was taken to him between two guards. It is true also that, as I did not then know his eminence, if I had been able to dispense with the visit, I should have been enchanted. He ill-treated you, then? He threatened you? He gave me his hand, and called me his friend. His friend! Do you hear that, madame? I am the friend of the great cardinal. Of the great cardinal. Perhaps you would contest his right to that title, madame. I would contest nothing, but I tell you that the favor of a minister is ephemeral, and that a man must be made mad to attach himself to a mineral. What does ephemeral mean? Short time. Got it. There are powers above his, which do not depend upon a man or the issue of an event. It is to these powers we should rally. I am sorry to hear it for it. I am sorry for it, madame, but I acknowledge no other power but that of the great man whom I have the honor to serve. You serve the cardinal? Yes, madame, and as his servant, I will not allow you to be concerned in plots against the safety of the state, or to serve the intrigues of a woman who is not French and who has a Spanish heart. Fortunately, we have the great cardinal. His vigilant eye watches over and penetrates to the bottom of the heart. Bonacieux was repeating word for word a sentence which he had heard from the Comte de Rochefort, but the poor wife, who had reckoned on her husband, and who, in that hope, had answered for him to the queen, did not tremble the less, both at the danger into which she had nearly cast herself, and at the helpless state to which she was reduced. Nevertheless, knowing the weakness of her husband, and more particularly his cupidity, she did not despair of bringing him round to her purpose. Ah, you are a cardinalist, then, monsieur, are you? Cried she. And you serve the party of those who maltreat your wife and insult your queen? Private interests are as nothing before the interests of all. I am for those who save the state, said Bonacieux emphatically. And what do you know about the state you talk of? Said Madame Bonacieux, shrugging her shoulders. Be satisfied with being a plain, straightforward citizen, and turn to that side which offers the most advantages. Said Bonacieux, slapping a plump round bag which returned a sound of money. What do you think of this, Madame Preacher? Whence comes that money? You do not guess? From the cardinal? From him, and from my friend, the Comte de Rochefort. The Comte de Rochefort? Why, it was he who carried me off. That may be, madame. And you received silver from that man? Have you not said that abduction was entirely political? Yes, but that abduction had for its object the betrayal of my mistress, to withdraw from me by torture confessions that might compromise the honor and perhaps the life of my august mistress. Madame, replied Bonacieux, your august mistress is a perfidious Spaniard, and what the cardinal does is well done. Monsieur, said the young woman, I knew you to be cowardly, avaricious, and foolish, but I never till now believed you infamous. Madame, said Bonacieux, who had never seen his wife in a passion and who recoiled before this conjugal anger, Madame, what do you say? I say you are a miserable creature, continued Madame Bonacieux, who saw she was regaining some little influence over her husband. You meddle with politics, do you? And still more with cardinalist politics? Why, you sell yourself body and soul to the demon, the devil, for money. No, to the cardinal. It's the same thing, cried the young woman. Who calls Richelieu calls Satan. Hold your tongue, madame. You may be overheard. Yes, you are right. I should be ashamed for anyone to know your baseness. But what do you require of me, then? Let us see. I have told you. You must depart instantly, monsieur. You must accomplish loyally the commission with which I deign to charge you, and on that condition I pardon everything. I forget everything. And what is more, and she held out her hand to him, I restore my love. Bonacieux was cowardly and avaricious, but he loved his wife. He was softened. A man of 50 cannot bear malice with a wife of 23. Madame Bonacieux saw that he hesitated. Come, have you decided? Said she. But, my dear love, reflect a little upon what you require of me. London is far from Paris, very far, and perhaps the commission with which you charge me is not without dangers. What matters it if you avoid them? Hold, Madame Bonacieux, said the mercer. Hold, I positively refuse. Intrigues terrify me. I have seen the Bastille. That is a frightful place, that Bastille. Only to think of it makes my flesh crawl. They threatened me with torture. Do you know what torture is? Wooden points that they stick between your legs till your bones stick out. No, positively I will not go. And morbleu, why do you not go yourself? For in truth, I think I have hitherto been deceived in you. I really believe you are a man, and a violent one too. And you are a woman, a miserable woman, stupid and brutal. You are afraid, are you? Well, if you do not go this very instant, I will have you arrested by the Queen's orders, and I will have you placed in the Bastille, which you dread so much. Bonacieux fell into a profound reflection. He weighed the two angers in his brain, that of the cardinal and that of the Queen. That of the cardinal predominated enormously. Have me arrested on the part of the Queen, said he, and I will appeal to his eminence. At once Madame Bonacieux saw that she had gone too far, and she was terrified at having communicated so much. She for a moment contemplated with fright that stupid countenance, impressed with the invincible resolution of a fool that is overcome by fear. Well, be it so, said she. Perhaps, when all is considered, you are right. In the long run, a man knows more about politics than a woman, particularly such as, like you, Monsieur Bonacieux, have turned it around on him. Monsieur Bonacieux have conversed with the cardinal, and yet it is very hard, added she, that a man upon whose affection I thought I might depend treats me thus unkindly and will not comply with any of my fancies. That is because your fancies go too far, replied the triumphant Bonacieux, and I mistrust them. Well, I will give it up then, said the young woman, sighing. It is well as it is. Say no more about it. At least you should tell me what I should have to do in London, replied Bonacieux, who remembered a little too late that Rochefort had desired him to endeavor to obtain his wife's secrets. It is of no use for you to know anything about it, said the young woman, whom an instinctive mistrust now impelled to draw back. It was about one of those purchases that interest women, a purchase by which much might have been gained. But the more the young woman excused herself, the more important Bonacieux thought the secret which she declined to confide to him. He resolved then to hasten immediately to the residence of the Comte de Rochefort, and tell him that the Queen was seeking for a messenger to send to London. Pardon me for quitting you, my dear Madame Bonacieux, said he, but not knowing you would come to see me, I had made an engagement with a friend. I shall soon return, and if you will wait only a few minutes for me, as soon as I have concluded my business with that friend, as it is growing late, I will come back and reconduct you to the Louvre. Thank you, monsieur. You are not brave enough to be of any use to me whatever, replied Madame Bonacieux. I shall return very safely to the Louvre all alone. As you please, Madame Bonacieux, said the ex-mercer. Shall I see you again soon? Next week I hope my duties will afford me a little liberty, and I will take advantage of it and come and put things in order here, as they must necessarily be much deranged. Very well, I shall expect you. You are not angry with me? Not the least in the world. Till then, then? Till then. Bonacieux kissed his wife's hand, and set off at a quick pace. Well, said Madame Bonacieux, when her husband had shut the street door and she found herself alone, that imbecile lacked but one thing, to become a cardinalist, and I, who have answered for him to the Queen, I, who have promised my poor mistress, my God, she will take me for one of those wretches with whom the palace swarms and who are placed about her with spies. Ah, Monsieur Bonacieux, I never did love you much, but now it is worse than ever. I hate you, and on my word you shall pay for this. At the moment she spoke these words, a rap on the ceiling made her raise her head, and a voice, which reached her through the ceiling, cried, Dear Madame Bonacieux, open for me the little door on the alley, and I will come down to you. Uh-oh. Don't do it. Alright. It's 12:30. I'll read one more chapter. Lover and husband. Ah, madame, said D'Artagnan, entering by the door which the young woman opened for him. Allow me to tell you that you have a bad sort of husband. You have, then, overheard our conversation? Asked Madame Bonacieux eagerly and looking at D'Artagnan with disquiet. The whole. But how, my God? By a mode of proceeding known to myself.
and by which I likewise overheard the more animated conversation which he had with the cardinal's police. And what did you understand by what we said? A thousand things. In the first place, that unfortunately your husband is a simpleton and a fool. In the next place, you are in trouble, of which I am very glad, as it gives me an opportunity of placing myself at your service, and God knows I am ready to throw myself into the fire for you. Finally, that the Queen wants a brave, intelligent, devoted man to make a journey to London for her. I have at least two of the three qualities you stand in need of, and here I am. He thinks himself brave and devoted. I guess he's saying he's not intelligent. But Madame, or the guy, the mercer isn't smart though either. Madame Bonacieux made no reply, but her heart beat with joy and secret hope shone in her eyes. And what guarantee will you give me, asked she, if I consent to confide this message to you? My love for you. Speak, command, what is to be done? Ah, my God, murmured the young woman. Ought I to confide such a secret to you, monsieur? You are almost a boy. I see that you require someone to answer for me. I admit that would reassure me greatly. Do you know Athos? No. Porthos? No. Aramis? No. Who are these gentlemen? Three of the king's musketeers. Do you know Monsieur de Treville, their captain? Oh, yes, him. I know him. Not personally, but from having heard the queen speak of him more than once as a brave and loyal gentleman. You do not fear lest he should betray you to the cardinal? Oh, no, certainly not. Well, reveal your secret to him, and ask him whatever, how important, however valuable, however terrible it may be, you may not confide it to me. But this secret is not mine, and I cannot reveal it in this manner. You were about to confide it in Monsieur Bonacieux, said D'Artagnan with chagrin. As one confides a letter to the hollow of a tree, to the wing of a pigeon, or to the collar of a dog. And yet me, you see plainly that I love you. You say so. I am an honorable man. You say so. I am a gallant fellow. I believe it. I am brave. Oh, I am sure of that. Then put me to the proof. Madame Bonacieux looked at the young man, restrained for a minute by a last hesitation. But there was such an ardor in his eyes, such persuasion in his voice, that she felt herself constrained to confide in him. Besides, she found herself in circumstances where everything must be risked for the sake of everything. The Queen might be as much injured by too much reticence as by too much confidence. And let us admit it, the involuntary sentiment which she felt for her young protector decided her to speak. Listen, said she. I yield to your protestations, I yield to your assurances, but I swear to you, before God who hears us, that if you betray me and my enemies pardon me, I will kill myself while accusing you of my death. And I swear to before God, madame, said D'Artagnan, that if I am taken while accomplishing the orders you give me, I will die sooner than do anything that may compromise anyone. Then the young woman confided in him the terrible secret of which chance had already communicated to him apart in front of the Samaritan. This was their mutual declaration of love. D'Artagnan was radiant with joy and pride. This secret which he possessed, this woman whom he loved, confidence and love made him a giant. I go, said he. I go at once. How you will go, said Madame Bonacieux, and your regiment, your captain? By my soul, you had made me forget all that, dear Constance. Yes, you are right. A furlough is needful. Still another obstacle, murmured Madame Bonacieux sorrowfully. As to that, cried D'Artagnan, after a moment of reflection, I shall surmount it, be assured. How so? I will go this very evening to Treville, whom I will request to ask this favor from me of his brother-in-law, Monsieur Dessessart. But another thing. What? Asked D'Artagnan, seeing that Madame Bonacieux hesitated to continue. You have perhaps no money? Perhaps is too much, said D'Artagnan, smiling. Then, replied Madame Bonacieux, opening a cupboard and taking from the very bag which half hour before her husband had caressed so affectionately, take this bag. Cardinals? Cried D'Artagnan, breaking into a loud laugh, he having heard, as may be remembered, thanks to the broken boards, every syllable of the conversation between the mercer and his wife. The cardinals, replied Madame Bonacieux. You see, it makes a very respectable appearance. Pardieu, cried D'Artagnan, it will be a double amusing affair to save the queen with the cardinal's money.
You are an amiable and charming young man, said Madame Bonacieux. Be assured you will not find her majesty ungrateful. Oh, I am already grandly recompensed, cried D'Artagnan. I love you. You permit me to tell you that I do. That is already more happiness than I dared to hope. Silence, said Madame Bonacieux. What? Someone is talking in the street. It is the voice of my husband. Yes, I recognize it. D'Artagnan ran to the door and pushed the bolt. "He shall not come in before I am gone," said he, "and when I am gone you can open to him. But I ought to be gone too. And that disappearance of his money, how am I to justify it if I am here? You are right, we must go out. Go out? How? He will see us if we go out. And you must come up into my room. Ah, said Madame Bonacieux, you speak that in a tone that frightens me. Madame Bonacieux pronounced these words with tears in her eyes. D'Artagnan saw those tears, and much disturbed, softened, he threw himself at her feet. With me you will be as safe as in a temple. I give you my word of a gentleman. Let us go, said she. I place full confidence in you, my friend. D'Artagnan drew back the bolt with precaution, and both, light as shadows, glided through the interior door into the passage, ascended the stairs as quietly as possible, and entered D'Artagnan's chambers. Once there, for greater security, the young man barricaded the door. They both approached the window, and through a slit in the shutter they saw Bonacieux talking with a man in a cloak. At sight of this man, D'Artagnan started, and half drawing his sword, sprang toward the door. It was the man of Meung. What are you going to do? Cried Madame Bonacieux. You will ruin us all. But I have sworn to kill that man, said D'Artagnan. Your life is devoted from this moment, and does not belong to you. In the name of the queen, I forbid you to throw yourself into any peril which is foreign to that of your journey. And do you command nothing in your own name? In my name, said Madame Bonacieux with great emotion. In my name, I beg you. But listen, they appear to be speaking of me. D'Artagnan drew near the window and lent his ear. Monsieur Bonacieux had opened his door, and seeing the apartment, had returned to the man in the cloak, whom he had left alone for an instant. She is gone. She must have returned to the Louvre. You are sure, replied the stranger, that she did not suspect the intentions with which you went out? No, replied Bonacieux with a self-sufficient air. She is too superficial a woman. Pfft. Is the young guardsman at home? I do not think he is. As you see, his shutter is closed, and you can see no light shine through the chinks of the shutters. All the same, it is well to be certain. How so? By knocking at his door. Go. I will ask his servant. Bonacieux re-entered the house, passed through the same door that had afforded a passage for the two fugitives, went up to D'Artagnan's door, and knocked. No one answered. Porthos, in order to make a greater display, had that evening borrowed Planchet. As to D'Artagnan, he took care not to give the least sign of existence. The moment the hand of Bonacieux sounded on the door, the two young people felt their hearts bound within them. There is nobody within, said Bonacieux. Never mind, let us return to your apartment. We shall be safer there than in the doorway. Ah, my God, whispered Monsieur Bonacieux, we shall hear no more. On the contrary, said D'Artagnan, we shall hear better. D'Artagnan raised the 3 or 4 boards which made his chamber another ear of Dionysus spread on the carpet of the floor, went upon his knees, and made a sign to Madame Bonacieux to stoop as he did toward the opening. You are sure there is nobody there? Said the stranger. I will answer for it, said Bonacieux. By knocking on the door, nobody answers. This guy's so stupid. And you think that your wife has returned to the Louvre without speaking to anyone but yourself? I am sure of it. That is an important point. Do you understand? Then the news I brought you is of value? The greatest, my dear Bonacieux. I don't conceal this from you. Then the cardinal will be pleased with me? I have no doubt of it. The great cardinal! You are sure in her conversation with your wife mentioned no names? I think not. She did not name Madame de Chevreuse, the Duke of Buckingham, or Madame de Verney? No, she only told me she wished to send me to London to serve the interests of an illustrious personage. The traitor, murmured Madame Bonacieux. Silence, said D'Artagnan, taking her hand, with which, without thinking of it, she abandoned to him. Uh-oh. Never mind, continued the man in the cloak. You were a fool not to have pretended to accept the mission. What's up, Mellanax? It's the best idea. I've been doing it for like a month now. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoy. Never mind, continued the man in the cloak. You were a fool not to have pretended to accept the mission.
You would then be in present possession of the letter. The state, which is now threatened, would be safe. And you? And I? Well, you, the cardinal, would have given you letters of nobility.
Did he tell you so?
Yes, I know that he meant to afford you that agreeable surprise. Start from the beginning. I'm 6 hours and 44 minutes in, but you can watch the VODs if you want. Did you come in hoping that I'd be practicing Super Metroid? Came to spy on me. By my letters of ability, yes, I knew that he meant to afford you that agreeable surprise. Be satisfied, replied Bonacieux. My wife adores me, and there is yet time. The ninny. The ninny, murmured Madame Bonacieux.
Silence, said D'Artagnan, pressing her hand more closely.
How is there still time? Asked the man in the cloak.
I go to the Louvre. I ask for Madame Bonacieux. I say that I have reflected. I renew the affair. I obtain the letter, and I run directly to the cardinal.
Well, go quickly. I will return soon to learn the result of your trip. The stranger went out.
Infamous,
said Madame Bonacieux, addressing this epithet to her husband.
Silence, said D'Artagnan, pressing her hand still more warmly.
A terrible howling interrupted these reflections of D'Artagnan and Madame Bonacieux. It was her husband who had discovered the disappearances of the money bag, and was crying, "Thieves!"
"Oh, my God!" cried Madame Bonacieux. "He will rouse the whole quarter."
Bonacieux called a long time, but as such cries, on account of their frequency, brought nobody in the Rue des Fossiers, and as lately the mercer's house had been a bad name, finding that nobody came, he went out, continuing to call, his voice being heard fainter and fainter as he went in the direction of the Rue de Bac.
"Now he is gone.
It is your turn to get out," said Madame Bonacieux. "Courage, my friend, but above all, prudence, and think what you owe to the queen."
"To her and to you," cried D'Artagnan. "Be satisfied, beautiful Constance. I shall become worthy of her gratitude. But shall I likewise be returned worthy of your love?"
The young woman only replied by the beautiful glow which mounted to her cheeks. A few seconds afterward, D'Artagnan also went out, enveloped in the large cloak, which ill concealed the sheath of a long sword. Madame Bonacieux followed him with her eyes, with that long, fond look with which he had turned the angle of the street. She fell on her knees, and clasping her hands,
"Oh, my God!" cried she. "Protect the queen! Protect me!"
Chapter 19. Plan of Campaign. D'Artagnan went straight to Monsieur de Tréville's. He had reflected that in a few minutes the cardinal would be warned by this cursed stranger, who appeared to be his agent, and he judged with reason he had not a moment to lose. The heart of the young man overflowed with joy. An opportunity presented itself to him in which there would be at the same time glory to be acquired and money to be gained, and as a far higher encouragement, it brought him into close intimacy with a woman he adored. This chance did, then, for him at once more than he would have dared to ask of Providence. Monsieur de Tréville was in his saloon with his habitual court of gentlemen. D'Artagnan, who was known as a familiar of the house, went straight to his office, and sent word that he wished to see him on something of importance. D'Artagnan had been there scarcely 5 minutes when Monsieur de Tréville entered. At the first glance, and by the joy which was painted on his countenance, the worthy captain plainly perceived that something new was on foot. All the way along D'Artagnan had been consulting with himself whether he should place confidence in Monsieur de Tréville, or whether he should only ask him to give him carte blanche for some secret affair. But Madame de Tréville had always been so Monsieur de Treville had always been so thoroughly his friend, had always been so devoted to the king and queen, and hated the cardinal so cordially, that the young man resolved to tell him everything. "Did you ask for me, my good friend?" said Monsieur de Treville.
"Yes, monsieur," said D'Artagnan, lowering his voice, "and you will pardon me, I hope, for having disturbed you when you know the importance of my business."
"Speak, then. I am all attention."
"It concerns nothing less," said D'Artagnan, "than the honor, perhaps the life, of the queen."
"Did you say?" asked Monsieur de Treville, glancing round to see if they were surely alone, and then fixing his questioning look upon D'Artagnan.
"I say, monsieur, that chance has rendered me master of a secret, which you will guard, I hope, young man, as your life, but which I must impart to you, monsieur, for you alone can assist me in the mission I have just received from Her Majesty."
"Is this secret your own?"
"No, monsieur, it is Her Majesty's."
"You authorized by Her Majesty to communicate it to me?"
No, monsieur, for, on the contrary, I am desired to preserve the profoundest mystery. What then are you about to betray to me? What then, are you about to betray it to me? Because, as I said, without you I can do nothing, and I am afraid you will refuse me the favor I come to ask, if you do not know to what end I ask it. Keep your secret, young man, and tell me what you wish. I wish you to obtain from me, from Monsieur Dessessart, leave of absence for 15 days. When? This very night. You leave for Paris? I am going on a mission. May you tell me whither? To London. Has anyone an interest in preventing your arrival there? The cardinal, I believe, would give the world to prevent my success. And you are going alone? I am going alone. In that case, you will not get beyond Bondy. I tell you so by the faith of de Treville. How so? You will be assassinated, and I shall die in my performance of my duty, but your mission will not be accomplished. That is true, replied D'Artagnan. Believe me, continued Treville, in enterprises of this kind, in order that one may arrive, 4 must be sent out. Oh, good. He has 3 friends. Ah, you are right, monsieur, said D'Artagnan. But you know Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, and you know if I can dispose of them. Without confiding to them the secret which I am not willing to know? We are sworn once for all to implicit confidence and devotedness against all proof. Besides, you can tell them that you have full confidence in me, and they will not be more incredulous than you. I consent to each of them leave of absence for 15 days, that is all. To Athos, whose wound still makes him suffer, to go to the waters of Forges, to Porthos and Aramis to accompany their friend, whom they are not willing to abandon in such a painful condition. Sending their leave of absence will be proof enough that I authorize their journey. Thanks, monsieur. You are 100 times too good. Begone then. Find them instantly, and let all be done tonight. Ha! But first write your request to Dessessart. Perhaps you had a spy at your heels, and your visit, if it should ever be known to the cardinal, will thus seem legitimate. D'Artagnan drew up his request, and Monsieur de Treville, on receiving it, assured him that by 2 o'clock in the morning the 4 leaves of absence should be at the respective domiciles of the travelers. Have the goodness to send mine to Athos's residence. I should dread some disagreeable encounter if it were to go home. Be easy. Adieu, and a prosperous voyage. A propos, said Monsieur de Treville, calling him back. D'Artagnan returned. Have you any money? D'Artagnan tapped the bag he had in his pocket. Enough? Asked Monsieur de Treville. 300 pistoles. Oh, plenty. That would carry you to the end of the world. Begone, then. D'Artagnan saluted Monsieur de Treville, who held out his hand to him. D'Artagnan pressed it with a respect mixed with gratitude. Since his first arrival at Paris, he had had constant occasion to honor this excellent man, whom he had always found worthy, loyal, and great. His first visit was to Aramis, at whose residence he had not been since the famous evening on which he had followed Madame Bonacieux. Still further, he had seldom seen the young Musketeer, but every time he had seen him, he had remarked a deep sadness imprinted on his countenance. This evening especially, Aramis was melancholy and thoughtful. D'Artagnan asked some questions about this prolonged melancholy. Aramis pleaded as his excuse a commentary upon the 18th chapter of St. Augustine, which he was forced to write in Latin for the following week, and which preoccupied him a good deal. After the 2 friends had been chatting a few moments, a servant from Monsieur de Treville entered, bringing a sealed packet. What is that? Asked Aramis. The leave of absence Monsieur has asked for, replied the lackey. For me? I have asked for no leave of absence. Hold your tongue and take it, said D'Artagnan. And you, my friend, there is a demi-pistole for your trouble. You will tell Monsieur de Treville that Monsieur Aramis is very much obliged to go. The lackey bowed to the ground and departed. Stopped. What has become of her? I suppose you mean, continued D'Artagnan. Become of whom? Replied Aramis. The woman who is here, the woman with the embroidered handkerchief. Who told you there was a woman here? Replied Aramis, becoming as pale as death. I saw her. And you know who she is? I believe I can guess, at least. Listen, said Aramis. Since you appear to know so many things, can you tell me what has become of that woman? I presume that she has returned to Tours. To Tours? Yes, that may be. You evidently know her. But why did she return to Tours without telling me anything? Because she was in fear of being arrested. Why has she not written me then? Because she was afraid of compromising you. D'Artagnan, you restore me to life, cried Aramis. I fancied myself despised, betrayed. I was so delighted to see her again. I could not have believed she would risk her liberty for me, and yet for what other cause could she have returned to Paris? For the cause which today makes us to England. And what is this cause? Demanded Aramis. Oh, you'll know it some day, Aramis, but at present I must imitate the discretion of the doctor's niece. Aramis smiled, as he remembered the tale he had told his friends on a certain evening. Well then, since she has left Paris, and you are sure of it, D'Artagnan, nothing prevents me, and I am ready to follow you. You say we are going to see Athos now, and if you will come thither, I beg you to make haste, for we have lost much time already. What's up, Gotwing? Thanks for tuning in. Hope you have a good time. Apropos, inform Bateson. Will Bateson go with us? Asked Aramis. Perhaps so. At all events, it is best that he should follow us to Athos's. Aramis called Bateson, and after having ordered him to join them at Athos's residence, and let us go then at the same time, taking his cloak, sword, and 3 pistols, opening uselessly 2 or 3 drawers to see if he could not find a stray coin. When well assured this search was superfluous, he followed D'Artagnan, wondering to himself how this young guardsman should know so well who the lady was to whom he had given hospitality, and that he should know better than himself what had become of her. I'm doing well. I was starting to kind of like wind down, but now the story's getting good and people are coming in, so maybe I'll keep going. It also makes me think that I'll probably push the time back and start at noon next week. I think that I started at 10 a.m. on the first time I started doing this show, but I'm finding that that's probably too early. And it's also too early for me, especially since I like to stay up late since I don't work on Tuesdays. Anyways, back to the game. Only as they went out, Aramis placed his hand upon the arm of D'Artagnan, and looking at him earnestly, "You have not spoken of this lady," said he, "to nobody in the world, not even to Athos or Porthos? I have not breathed a syllable to them." "Good enough." Tranquil on this important point, Aramis continued his way with D'Artagnan, and both soon arrived at Athos's dwelling. They found him holding his leave of absence in one hand, and Monsieur de Tréville's note in the other. "Can you explain to me what signify this leave of absence and this letter, which I have just received?" asked the astonished Athos. "My dear Athos, I wish, as your health absolutely requires it, that you should rest for a fortnight. Go, then, and take the waters of Forges, or any that may be more agreeable to you, and recuperate yourself as quickly as possible. Yours affectionate, de Tréville." Well, this leave of absence and that letter mean that you must follow me, Athos. To the waters of Forges? There, or elsewhere. In the king's service? Either the king's or the queen's. Are we not their majesties' servants? At that moment, Porthos entered. "Pardieu," said he, "here is a strange thing. Since when, I wonder, in the Musketeers did they grant men leave of absence without their asking for it?" "Since," said D'Artagnan, "they have friends who ask it for them." Ah," said Porthos, "it appears there's something fresh here." Yes, we are going," said Aramis. "To what country?" demanded Porthos. "My faith, I don't know much about it," said Athos. "Ask D'Artagnan." "To London, gentlemen," said D'Artagnan. "To London!" cried Porthos. "And what the devil are we going to do in London?" "That is what I am not at liberty to tell you, gentlemen. You must trust me." "But in order to go to London," added Porthos, "money is needed, and I have none." "Nor I," said Aramis. "Nor I," said Athos. "I have," replied D'Artagnan, pulling out his treasure from his pocket and placing it on the table. "There are in this bag 300 pistols. Let each take 75. That is enough to take us to London and back. Besides, make yourselves easy. We shall not all arrive at London." I am reading classics on Twitch, Squidman. How you doing today? Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy. I've been doing this for about a month now. I have a collection of VODs if you want to go back and play them later, but yeah, I'm starting to think that I should probably not do it so early.
Nobody like showed up for 2 hours. Alrighty. Well, there were a couple faithful viewers. Whoever they were, I don't know. Probably foosed this bot. Why so? Because in all probability, some of us will be left on the road. In this, then, a campaign upon which we are now entering, one of the most dangerous kind. I give you notice. Ah, but if we do risk being killed, said Porthos, at least I should like to know what for. You would be all the wiser, said Athos. And yet, said Aramis, I am somewhat of Porthos's opinion. Is the king accustomed to give you such reasons? No. He says to you jauntily, Gentlemen, there is fighting going on in Gascony or in Flanders. Go and fight. And you go there. Why? You need give yourselves no more uneasiness about this. D'Artagnan is right, said Athos. Here in our 3 leaves of absence, which came from Monsieur de Treville, and here are 300 pistols, which came from I don't know where. So let us go and get killed where we are told to go. Is life worth the trouble of so many questions? D'Artagnan, I am ready to follow you. And I also, said Porthos. And I also, said Aramis. And indeed, I am not so sorry to quit Paris. I had need of distraction. Well, you will have distractions enough, gentlemen, be assured, said D'Artagnan. And now, when are we to go? Asked Athos. Immediately, replied D'Artagnan. We have not a minute to lose. Hello, Grimaud, Planchet, Mousqueton, Bateson, cried the 4 young men, calling their lackeys. Clean my boots and fetch the horses from the hotel. Each musketeer was accustomed to leave at that general hotel, as at a barrack, his own horse and that of his lackey. Planchet, Grimaud, Mousqueton, and Bateson set off at full speed. Now let us lay down the plan of campaign, said Porthos. Where do we go first? To Calais, said D'Artagnan. That is the most direct line to London. Well, said Porthos, this is my advice. Speak. 4 men traveling together would be suspected. D'Artagnan will give each of us his instructions. I will go by the way of Boulogne to clear the way. Athos will set out 2 hours after by that of Amiens. Aramis will follow us by that of Noyon. As to D'Artagnan, he will go by what route he thinks is best, in Planchet's clothes, while Planchet will follow us like D'Artagnan, in the uniform of the guards. Gentlemen, said Athos, my opinion is that it is not proper to allow lackeys to have anything to do in such an affair. A secret may, by chance, be betrayed by gentlemen, but it is almost always sold by lackeys. Porthos's plan appears to me to be impracticable, said D'Artagnan. Inasmuch I am myself ignorant of what instructions I can give you. I am the bearer of a letter, that is all. I have not, and I cannot, make 3 copies of that letter, because it is sealed. We must then, as it appears to me, travel in company. This letter is here, in this pocket. And he pointed to the pocket which contained the letter. If I should be killed, one of you must take it and continue the route. If he be killed, it will be another's turn, and so on. Provided a single one arrives, that is all that is required. Bravo, D'Artagnan, your opinion is mine, cried Athos. Besides, we must be consistent. I am going to take the waters. You will accompany me. Instead of taking the waters at Forges, I go and take sea waters. I am free to do so. If anyone wishes to stop us, I will show Monsieur de Treville's letter, and you will show your leaves of absence. If we are attacked, we will defend ourselves. If we are tried, we will stoutly maintain that we were only anxious to dip ourselves a certain number of times in the sea. They would have an easy bargain of 4 isolated men, whereas 4 men taken together make a troop. We will arm our 4 lackeys with pistols and musketoons. If they send an army out against us, we will give battle, and the survivor, as D'Artagnan says, will carry the letter. Well said, cried Aramis. You don't often speak, Athos, but when you speak, it is like St. John of the Golden Mouth. I agree to Athos's plan. And you, Porthos? I agree to it too, said Porthos, if D'Artagnan approves of it. D'Artagnan, being the bearer of the letter, is naturally the head of the enterprise. Let him decide, and we will execute. Well, said D'Artagnan, I decide that we should adopt Athos's plan, and that we should set off in half an hour. Agreed, shouted the 3 musketeers in chorus. Each one, stretching out his hand to the bag, took his 75 pistols, and made his preparations to set out at the time appointed. Chapter 20. At 2 o'clock in the morning, our 4 adventurers left Paris by the Barrière de Saint-Denis. As long as it was dark, they remained silent. In spite of themselves, they submitted to the influence of the obscurity.
and apprehended ambushes on every side. With the first rays of day, their tongues were loosened. With the sun, gaiety revived. It was like the eve of a battle. The heart beat, the eyes laughed, and they felt that the life they were perhaps going to lose was, after all, a good thing. Besides, the appearance of the caravan was formidable. The black horses of the Musketeers, their martial carriage, with the regimental step of these noble companions of the soldier, would have betrayed the most strict incognito. The lackeys followed, armed to the teeth. All went well until they arrived at Chantilly, which they reached about 8 o'clock in the morning. They needed breakfast, and alighted at the door of the auberge, recommended by a sign representing St. Martin giving half his cloak to a poor man. They ordered the